What's going on, everybody? Brandon Warren here for another Cold Omaha Zone Coverage Periscope chat. Call it the Midwest Swing Podcast as well, so we can kind of do a little bit of a simulcast here as we talk about the Twins winning over Kansas City to open up the series with a 6-4 victory at the K. Really nice job by the Twins tonight to come back with a big 4-run, 4-spot in the 8th inning. Some interesting things going on in the 8th inning. For instance, Joe Mauer getting pitched to with first base open, runners on second and third, cashes it in with a double to shallow right. Lined it pretty hard past Hosmer at first base. Did a really nice job. And so I thought Mauer, this is probably the first year that he gets pitched to in that situation. It certainly helped that Miguel Sano was behind him, which is also interesting. It does not help that Sano was behind him. Sano was in front of him. I got screwed up there. A little strange that Ned Yost opted to pitch to him with Robbie Grossman batting behind him. You could have loaded the bases and faced him, and I think that would have been preferable. But that's for another day, another time. I'm also a little surprised that, why not bring in Scott Alexander to face Mauer? And then I know you got Grossman due up next, but then you could walk Grossman after you get Mauer and face Castro, who ended up facing Alexander in the first place. So I feel like that inning was not particularly well managed by Ned Yost. Another option, not really an option because it wasn't realistic, but that Matt Strahm threw earlier in the game meant that he wasn't available to pitch the 8th. The fact that he didn't pitch the 8th, I guess it was a little strange that Strahm didn't start the 8th to face Eddie Rosario, obviously a left-handed hitter. Doesn't really have platoon splits, but I thought that was strange. Love to hear your guys' takes. Again, this is the Midwest Swing Periscope, so I will be posting it as a podcast as well. Do a little simulcast action. Check us out at zonecoverage.com. We got crazy NFL draft coverage so far. Lots of great stuff. Only 2 Vikings picks so far, but 7 coming down tomorrow. It's a pretty exciting day. We can talk a little Vikings NFL draft as long as you understand that I'm a rube like most of you. I do want them to take Desmond King tomorrow, and I do suspect they'll take Arizona State kicker Zane Gonzalez at some point. But other than that, I don't have a lot of great takes. I cover college football for my other job, but it's very surface level. So I know a lot of the offensive players, which is good, but it doesn't mean that I know a ton of what I'm talking about. Again, if you want to support Cold Omaha and Zone Coverage, go to zonecoverage.com/Amazon for all your Amazon shopping needs, whether you use Amazon Prime, Amazon Pantry. Nothing changes for you. The Amazon storefront is the same, but we get a little bit of support from Amazon. So if you shop at Amazon, and most of you do, I know I buy pretty much everything at Amazon, go to zonecoverage.com/Amazon. Now that we got that out of the way, let's chat about whatever you guys want to talk about. I did see in the chat room here that Doubles asked how much to extend Miguel Sano for. 1 second there. Also, if you want to send tweets to me at Brandon_Warren during the broadcasts, those questions stay up on my tweet deck, which if you can see me pointing, is to my left. Those will stay up in perpetuity. They do not stay up on the Periscope. So it's always easier for you to send questions to me on Twitter so I can read them. So anyway, back to the question from Doubles about Miguel Sano getting extended. Yeah, I mean, it's a touch-and-go deal. Nick Tuttle on the chat room here says 5 years, $70 million. I think I'd go with 8 years and $120 million personally. What that comes down to is buying up some of his first years here with a little added money as kind of a pillow up front. And then I believe it's like a 6-year deal with 2 $24 million options on the back end. There was a pretty good breakdown on Twins Daily. If you check out the thread there, I think I took someone's 5-year deal. Oh, I might have said 7 years, $100 million. I think they had 5 and 52. I added 2 $24 million team options on the back end to get to 7 100. I'd have no problem with 8 120 or something in that area. Obviously, 8 120 with the model that I've laid out would only be $20 million more for 1 year, which may not exactly work, but something in that 7 to 8 year vicinity is about what I'd be looking for. So I think if you can get him signed for 7 8 years, I think I absolutely would as well. Ryan Sawyer says game day had several pitches as two-seam fastballs at 82 to 84 and 90 to 93 for the fastball. Well, I do have Brooks Baseball here in front of me. I was actually looking at Gibson's numbers. Looked like he got, I think, 7 swinging strikes tonight. With Gibson, the swinging strikes are never going to be real ample. ESPN for Gibson has only 10 first pitch strikes to 23 batters. You got to do a little better than that. As far as swinging strikes, they have 8 for Gibson on 85 pitches, which is a pretty good rate. Again, I don't doubt that the stuff is decent enough. It's the execution of the stuff that has just not been there. Now, if that's a new mechanics thing, needing time for him to work through it, that's possible. What's surprising to me, though, is just 1 strikeout with 8 swinging strikes over 85 pitches and 3 walks. Obviously not a ratio you want to keep up with. Anyway, as promised, the Belial figures here as we pull that up on brooksbaseball.net. If you're not checking out Brooks, you got to start checking it out. I use it for all my recaps, and it's fantastic. Brooks has a 2-seamer averaging 88.3, maxing out at 93.4. A slider, he only threw 1 at 86.8, and then a curve about 76. That's a low average. I would guess it's probably a classification issue. They've had some classification issues lately. Phil Hughes was telling me about some classification issues as well with his changeup. And I think the issue there for Hughes is that he's just never thrown a changeup before, or at least not recently, and there could be some issues with the logarithm. So or the algorithm, not logarithm. Sorry, I'm getting my math figures confused here. Those aren't meant to be gospel, too, which is why I have to remember that when I'm writing and breaking things down. So I think Belial is, for the most part, fine, but we'll wait and find out. Matt Liefeld wants to know what's going on with Gibson, and Ben Antel wants to know why he was pulled after 85 pitches. Well, he was pulled in the 6th inning with 1 out. I don't know. He just wasn't throwing enough strikes for me. First and foremost, a 9-man bullpen, you don't really need to let things go too far. Sorry, I got cats running around here. It's crazy. I think they did want to go with Bo Shears to face Alex Gordon, which worked out. Bo Shears coming back out for a 2nd inning was interesting, but I also do think that him facing Brandon Moss, lefty, is not that big of a deal. So, I mean, you can kind of take or leave Buddy Bo Shears being used in that role, but I don't really have an issue with it. Gibson, 51 pitches for strikes out of 85. Not really a great rate, but not the worst either. So, I don't know. I just think it might have been a matchups thing. He had, he walked the leadoff batter in the 5th. What did he do in the 3rd? Single in the 3rd. Walked to lead off the 2nd. I don't know. He was just kind of all over the place. 10 out of 23 first pitch strikes. I get the sense that maybe Molitor had just seen enough. And, it's, again, with a 9-man bullpen, you have that luxury. I do think Bo Shears will be headed back. When the Twins come to Minnesota, I think he'll be headed back to Rochester. Interesting to see Nick Turley, who we talked about on the Midwest Swing podcast today with Chris Blessing of Baseball HQ. He got moved up to AAA Rochester from Chattanooga. And so he's going to be interesting to watch. Chris told me that he's talked to some people who think Turley could help the Twins now in the bullpen, in the big league bullpen. So it will be interesting to see if they move him quickly, because as a 27-year-old guy, it's not really like he's got a lot left to show in the minor leagues. He also said that the last time he had seen Turley before joining the Twins, he looked a lot different, 84 to 88 with a fastball, and now he's 90 to 95. So I don't, obviously they've got some lefties on the roster in terms of Mason Militakis and Bo Shears, but Turley sounds like he's pretty interesting. Nick Tuttle asking, where did Turley come from? He was a minor league free agent. I'm actually going to pull up his profile here because Chris thought it was the Yankees system. I do see him in a Portland hat. Yep. So he had been in the Yankees system to start with for, it looks like, about 7 years. Went and played some indie ball in Somerset with the Patriots last year. If I'm not mistaken, Somerset might have been where Buddy Boshears was playing before as well. Did some winter ball down in Estrellas, and then he also, Portland in the Boston farm system. Lots of walks. He's had strikeouts at times. It's an interesting arm, and actually, I think what you have to really consider here is the Cleveland Indians factor and the Falvey factor, and that Cleveland has found some fairly good pitchers. They pulled Corey Kluber basically out of thin air from the Padres system. Kluber, I believe, was a 25-year-old getting crushed in Double-A, or maybe it might have been 24-year-old, and didn't look like a guy at all, and they turned him into something pretty good. So who knows, maybe Nick Turley could be that guy for the Twins. I mean, obviously he's older, and it's a relief role, but if you pull a guy like that out of thin air, that's a pretty good feather in your cap. I also thought maybe Drew Rucinski could be a guy like that. I haven't seen his numbers at AAA Rochester yet to really substantiate that he's going to be any good. But I do think that it's going to be one of those deals where they are able to find better diamonds in the rough, maybe, than Terry Ryan and company did. And I liked Terry Ryan quite a bit. Yeah, Drew Rucinski, let's see. 2.89 ERA, 5 appearances, 12.5 strikeouts per 9, 1.9 walks per 9. So Ryan Sawyer wants to know, how does the Atlantic League compared to affiliated ball as far as levels? Players go back and forth. I think I wouldn't compare it to Double A because that's where a lot of the prospects are, and that might be a little bit of a mixed metaphor. But I do think it's probably somewhere in that high A, Double A range. You see guys that kind of stall out at those levels, or maybe have some success at AAA and then go kill it there. There was this 300-pound guy playing for Winnipeg a couple years ago that had been a quad A player in the Red Sox system, and he was just mashing until about AAA. He got to be about 30 years old and ended up playing for Winnipeg. Just a huge guy, and he just was killing it there. But his name escapes me now. It was I think 4 or 5 years ago that I was at an FM Redhawks game and saw this guy. So at that point, I think Bobby Korecki was on the Winnipeg team as well. So yeah, I don't know what I mean. I'm looking for other questions here. Matt Liefeld says, looks like Buxton seems to be turning it around. Do you agree? Yeah, I think so. Obviously, the on-base percentage, I think it's at 243 coming out of tonight. He did see 20 pitches in 4 plate appearances, which is obviously a good sign. Not falling into those 0-2, 1-2 counts where he's defensive swings or frankly just ugly swings. I think it's the early part of the turnaround. As I've said on a couple of broadcasts in the last week, I traded a $5 Jose Barrios in fantasy baseball for a $14 Byron Buxton. So I'm a big believer in Buxton as far as his ability to, what he's going to be capable of when he turns things around, which I think he's in the process of doing right now. We can't have a broadcast here or a podcast here without talking about how great Miguel Sano was tonight. A home run, 4 RBIs. I thought that second ball he hit was out. He called it a cookie that Soria left for him I'm seeing it on Twitter from Mike Berardino, who's on site in Kansas City. And, Miguel Sano is just phenomenal. He's a great guy to talk to, great guy to get to know. And, I thought that was a grand slam out of the park for Miggy Smalls. I'm trying to get that nickname to catch on. It might be stupid, but everything I do can tend to be a little bit stupid. So we'll see if it catches on. But great game. He's up to 297 for the batting average. So he's another knock or two from getting over 300, which is incredible. And slugging 649. I think one thing we've also lost sight of is that Brian Dozier is off to kind of a slow start, which is, it happened last year as well, and he obviously caught fire in late May after Paul Molitor had sat him down. I don't think he's going to have that kind of a slow start or anything, but it is nice to see fans not necessarily leaning on it or focusing on it. I do think last year's finish bought him some time in the eyes of those fans. Doubles did ask on the chat room, are we done calling Jorge Polanco at shortstop an experiment and just starting to think of him as a guy there? I am. I mean, I don't see why not. I think he looks great at shortstop. I'm trying to start Lo Natural or El Natural. I'm going to have to ask Eduardo Escobar if he would call him Lo Natural or El Natural, because I get the dialectics a little bit goofed up as far as how you would call someone the natural in the language they speak. But I think he looks natural at the plate. I think he looks natural defensively. He's done a really nice job turning himself into a really nice shortstop. And Chris Blessing, like I said, from Baseball HQ, who was on the podcast today, that's up on Midwest Swing and ZoneCoverage.com, did a really great. He said basically he was won over by Polanco in Elizabethton, and then he's just been impressed with him as he's made himself a better player with work ethic and everything, working his way up through the system. And so he's impressed by him. I'm impressed by him. And I think it's a really a feather in his cap and player development's cap to have turned him into such a nice player who, the offense has slipped a little bit in recent days, but I think you're looking at a guy 750 OPS every day at shortstop, fairly good defender. I think it's a really nice player to have. Doubles also just said he wishes the Twins would market Sano better. I think that's all in the works. It'll be interesting to see how they market him. I think it's difficult because there were some maturity issues at first, especially last year. Just some things that I saw behind the scenes that I'm probably not going to talk about publicly, but I do think that they want him to take a leadership role as far as not only in the clubhouse, on the field, a spoken leader and a visible leader. And I do think that he's going to. I do think he's going to be doing that because he obviously likes to have fun on the field. He's obviously a fiery guy, as we saw in the Detroit series. But I think that's the kind of thing that rallies your teammates up and riles them up. Again, not that I think professional athletes need a lot of motivation on the field, but I do think that sometimes they rally around that kind of thing. And so I think Miguel Sano is a work in progress. And somebody had commented here, maybe a language barrier. Yeah, he gave an entire interview in English the other night, and did a really nice job. So I can tell that he's actually, or that's something that's important to him. I mean, the Twins have Carlos Font available for us so that we can speak to these guys and not have to worry about anything being misinterpreted, which is also good because sometimes there is that barrier where it sounds like they say one thing, they mean something else, and it can lead to issues. That's basically the Roberto Clemente career in a nutshell. So I do like that the Twins have that, or that the major leagues have got those translators on the payroll. But Miguel Sano giving interviews in English, if that's something that he wants to focus on, that's great. I don't think it's necessary, but he's done a nice job with that. And I think he's going to be a clubhouse leader and the kind of guy that can be leaned on heavily in the future for this team as a leader both on and off the field. Beyond that, I don't know. I mean, it was a pretty quiet night. A couple hits for Eddie Rosario, who's up to 273, 300 on base, 377 slugging. He's starting to come around. Obviously, not taking very many walks, but I also like him batting 8th or 9th. And I think that Buxton, as he starts to swing a little better, you can bump him up a little bit, maybe 7th, and Castro can be bumped down if he's not swinging it well. There's going to be a lot of options, I think, for Paul Molitor based on who's playing well, who's not, and what kind of flexibility that he'll have in that respect. One thing I did notice, actually, it looks like the Twins are going to miss Danny Duffy too, which is a big bonus. Had been off to a good start. I haven't seen his numbers now in a few days, but missing out on him. Ian Kennedy's usually a little bit easier to hit. He's been pretty good this year, and Jason Vargas is off to a really nice start. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can crack him as well. Soft tossing lefties with his kind of numbers is just kind of strange. So we'll see. And who am I missing here? Yeah, Jason Hamill tomorrow. I believe the Twins put it to him pretty good at Target Field. So I liked him with the Cubs last year, but I don't know how healthy he is. As far as they were worried about his health coming into the season. I think that's part of why he didn't sign so early. Doubles just asked, how long of a leash does Kyle Gibson have? I think it's probably a lot longer than people want to believe. I mean, you get the first round pedigree, ground ball. Ground balls are obviously a big thing in as far as undervalued pitchers. He looked better tonight in some respects, swinging strikes and all that. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to disappoint you there, but I just don't think it's a short leash. And if they were to move on from him, it would be to put him in the bullpen, which, I mean, I think his stuff could play up. He was hitting 93, I think 93.4 was his peak. If you had a guy like that hitting 95 out of the bullpen with a sinker-slider combo, it might be the Mike Pelfrey special, which says a lot about him as a starter, too. So it could work, though. And I think they'll have that creativity this year to see which guys, if they can't hack it in the rotation, could try it out in the bullpen. Pelfrey started tonight, got beat up by his old friends, the Tigers, and I really do think he could still hack it as a reliever. But the more days go by, the less likely it looks that he's open to that, or that teams are willing to try that, which is unfortunate. But it's not my money being wasted, so yeah. Doubles saying, hoping Gibson could be Big Pelf. Good gravy. Now, I'm not saying hoping. I'm saying I have big hopes for Pelfrey as a reliever, and I think Gibson does a lot of things that Pelfrey does better. Obviously, more strikeouts, can lose his command at times, and is ground ball heavy. I think Gibson's a much better pitcher than Pelfrey. I just think that if you're convinced, like I am, that Pelfrey could go to the bullpen and be very good, there's no reason that Gibson couldn't do more than that. So I don't know. I don't know that that's in the immediate workings, but yeah. Says a lot where Gibson is, Doubles just said too as well. Yeah, I mean, it's not really how the mighty have fallen, because I think he's got a career like 4.6 something ERA. And I think expectations have to be modest, and 2015 looks more like an outlier than the rule at this point, which is not terribly impressive even in its own right. Not a ton of strikeouts and some struggles as well. I don't know. I think I'd let him go a little while, but I understand why people are growing tired with him and would want to non-tender him at the end of the season. I don't really get the DFA buzz because, Adalberto Mejia is not guaranteed to give you better innings than him. Jose Barrios should give you better innings, but you still need a fifth starter anyway. So I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to have an open mind to differing viewpoints about Kyle Gibson, but at the same time, too, you've only got $3 million sunk into him. He's not guaranteed any money after this year. You might as well ride it out. Again, it can't get any worse than the previous 3 starts or whatever it was. But to call tonight as a bounce back or a stepping stone isn't really accurate either. How great has Big Irv been, pitching like a consummate pro, Doubles says. Yeah, I know the numbers and what they say about a guy like that regressing, but I also think that it's indicative of how he's pitched. He's not going to sustain a 1 point whatever or 0 point whatever ERA. I've been very impressed with his approach. It's moving the fastball in and out of the zone. The slider has been really good. And then even when he goes to the changeup, it's been a really effective pitch for him. He kind of loses and gains feel for it from time to time, is what he's told me, and that will kind of dictate how much he'll throw it in any given game. But he's had a feel for everything so far this season. And I do think, yeah, you have to start thinking about what he'll bring in July, if not sooner, because it's a situation where a 34-year-old guy, Father Time is undefeated. He's thrown a ton of sliders in his career. Did have the Tommy John scare a few years ago. I think it was 4, 5, 6 years ago, somewhere with the Angels. He's a good clubhouse guy. He's a super intelligent guy, but you can really market the fact that if a team acquires him this year, they'd get him all of next year, plus have the option to bring him back for a year after that if he continues to pitch like this. If he doesn't continue to pitch like this, it's just a tearaway deal. It's perforated. You just move on. And you still get next year, which, I mean, the odds are still fairly good he'd be useful next year. If he pitches like he did last year, this year, and then again next year, you might keep him the year after that as well. So I don't think it would be a rental situation. I mean, it's obviously an entire year in addition to this year. But I think the extended level of control that the team acquiring would have, considering it's a team option, should drive that price up a little bit, and the Twins should be able to get a nice piece for him. Matt Liefeld wants to know thoughts on Santiago being a reliable fantasy asset. Yeah, the changeup for me has been the biggest thing for Santiago. It's up to like a 14% whiff rate. I believe it was a rate of like 9.6. So he's getting swinging strikes on it. He's had better command. He throws that fastball, 91, 92. I think there's an occasional 93 in there. High in the strike zone. And I tell you what, guys just swing through it. I still can't understand how it works, if it's a spin rate thing. And I'm still trying to learn what spin rates mean and how they're the calculations and all that, and how effective velocity works. But he's just been really good. I don't know if I would use him in shallow leagues. Like a 12-teamer would be probably the limit. But as far as like low ownership, I just recommended him today in my streaming 2-starter column on Rotographs, and yeah, he's won me over as a guy who's a really smart, kind of gutty pitcher that's really really smart and just I keep saying smart and intelligent, but he just seems to be one step ahead of the hitters at all times, and pitches like a guy who's much older than, I think he's like 28, maybe 29, but he pitches like a guy who's in his mid-30s, which is incredible. And that's why I think he'll age well, and it would be interesting to see if he would be open to an extension with the Twins and what that would look like. Because, if he signs for 3 years, a 3-year deal, you don't really have to be too worried about. It's those 4 and 5 year deals, and I don't think anybody's going to give him that. Because if you look at his advanced statistics, I mean, he's only been worth just a couple WAR, wins above replacement on Fangraphs, in his career. So I think there's a good buying opportunity to keep him around as like a number 4, number 5 starter. And I don't know, there's not, as long as you don't expect more than that, that's not so bad. Ryan Sawyer says he's hitting 94, 95 in the WBC. Is there that much more adrenaline? I mean, I think there's adrenaline, but also I don't know if those guns are calibrated the same way. I mean, I know a lot of the WBC games were played in big league parks, at least the ones obviously in America. I don't know. I think adrenaline plays obviously a factor, but I don't think he's 94, 95 with any consistency. Obviously, his arm's fresh as far as early in the season, and I don't think we've seen any 94 or 95s in stadium guns so far this year. So it's, I don't know. I just don't think that's legit. But really great guy, really great pitcher, and I was kind of resigned to the fact that he was going to play out the string this year, maybe be traded, or maybe if he pitched very poorly, get designated. But at this point now, obviously very early, but if he continues to pitch like this, you might approach him with an extension offer where you see if he wants to hang around for 2 or 3 years. And he seems to like Minnesota. Minnesota seems to like him. And I don't know. I mean, pitchers like Hector Santiago don't grow on trees. You believe in the fielding independent pitching, which we call FIP in the nerd business. He consistently beats that. He's like the anti-Ricky Nolasco in pretty much every way you can imagine. Right-handed, good with the media, beats his fielding independent. He beats his peripherals. Not great command, but gets it done. Whereas Ricky does the exact opposite. Pretty much every way you can imagine. So, I don't know. All right, guys, that's all I got. I'm trying to keep it under a half hour because I lost the video last time, and so I'm trying to keep it under a half hour. Last question I'm going to take. Nick Tuttle. Are the days of 93 to 94 gone for Phil? I'm assuming Phil Hughes. Yes, I do think 93 to 94 is gone, but 91, 92, and he could still be good. That changeup is going to be a useful pitch for him if he can keep a feel for it and hit 90, 91 with a fastball. All right, you've been listening to the Midwest Swing Podcast and Brandon Warren on Periscope. Peace.